And the third speaker that we have is Rocio Quispe Agnoli, and she's the director of the CISAH Associate Professor of Colonial Hispanic Studies, core faculty of Latin American Studies and Gender Studies, and affiliated faculty of American Studies and American Indian Studies at Michigan State. So without further ado, I will have Professor Agnoli come and speak.
Well, thank you very much. First of all, I would like to introduce myself. In Runasimi Rocio Quispe Agnoli, Ñojajacani, Lima, Peru, Manta Pacha. My name is Rocio Quispe Agnoli. I come from Lima, Peru. Thank you very much for having me here today to share my ideas about teaching native voices of Latin America, Indians, in the North American College. I would like to introduce myself a little bit with a little bit detail because all the other panelists have done so. Quispe is a very common Quechua name in Peru. It's as common as Smith can be in the United States for white Americans. And for Peruvian standards, racially, socially speaking, I am white. However, when I meet Peruvians outside Peru, and also inside Peru now that I live in the United States, they usually start to ask me 3 questions in order to locate me in the racial ethnic map of Peru, of the Peruvian society. The first one is, where do your parents live? By the neighborhood, they can immediately locate where, in which social class, to what social class my parents belong, and therefore, what is probably my social affiliation, which is very much embedded with racial ethnic background. The second question they ask is, what college did you attend? I went to college in Lima, and I went to a private Catholic college. So they immediately, they confirm what they have found out with the first question, with the answer to the first question. The third and last question is, what's your last name? When I say my last name, Quispe, I rarely add the Agnoli. The Agnoli is my mother's last name. As you know, in the Hispanic societies, we carry our father and our mother's last name together. Women in Hispanic societies today do not carry the last name of the husband when we marry. We keep our original last names. So I usually say just Rocio Quispe, and that's, you should see their faces because it doesn't fit the picture they have. I am socially, culturally, and perhaps visually white, but I have an indigenous, quite common last name, which is in additional a Quechua last name, which means light reflection. And the most daring Peruvians tell me, that's not true, that's an accident, your last name cannot be Quispe, because you're white. Okay, so I just want to share this experience with you that happens all the time. And to me, here in Europe, I mean, wherever in the world I am, in Peru as well, to explain why I ended up studying issues of race, ethnicity, and Andean from the Andes, Andean identity, because it's a part of myself that I needed to understand since I was a child. Well, today I'm going to talk about mediated Asians teaching indigenous voices of Latin American in the North American College, because this is a challenge that I face in my undergraduate and graduate classes here at Michigan State and in the institutions I work before coming here. And I want to depart from a few questions that I constantly ask myself. And before the question here, you have the image of a quipu Kamayok. The quipu is the equivalent to a writing system that the Incas developed, or the Andean people developed before the Spaniards arrived. Is quite abstract and difficult to understand, but is equivalent to the alphabetic writing in the West. And Kamayok is a Quechua term that means to animate, to give life. The quipu Kamayok, this is what you have here in this picture, is the one who animates the quipu. In other words, the one who makes it talk. well, so the questions that I ask myself when I am trying to teach my graduate and undergraduate students here about Latin American Indians is how do we approach, study, present, represent, create knowledge and bring it to the US classroom about Latin and Native American peoples' voices and works. The next question is how do we make visible Native or Latin American peoples to our students, and how do we go from a passive Indian object like the Indians that appear in this photograph to an Indian subject. And I have chosen the picture of Martin Chambi, who is a Cusco photographer, Indian. Chambi is also a Quechua last name from the very early 20th century because he is one of those few Indian photographers. We had a nice group just in the early 20th century in the Cusco area who photographed Indians. So in talking to some of my colleagues, when they make research on images of American Indians, I always ask them, well, and did you have a guild or a generation of Indian photographers who took pictures of the photograph? Because many times the image of the photograph tells me more about the photographer than about what is being pictured. So I think this is an interesting difference or an interesting feature that we have in among South American Indians. So here what you have when I start talking about indigenous identity in Latin America, I want to make that difference clear because there are similarities with what is being discussed here, but there are also differences. These are one of the key concepts or key terms that I will be talking about today. When one talks about nativeness, if that term exists, or indigeneity as applied to the Americas, two sets of concepts come immediately to mind. First, identity, and second, identity and otherness, and secondly, authenticity and the search of the true Indian. Identity and truth are strongly associated, especially when we talk about indigenous identity. What and who is the true Indian? That is, what and who is the authentic Indian? This search of truth, authenticity, and identity in relation to Latin American Indians is historically marked and deviated from its natural development by the processes of European conquest and colonization of the Americas. I would like to take some minutes to indicate my reflection on the idea of identity and authenticity from a Latin American perspective. Identity, in the broader sense of the term, defines each of us in a variety of ways and according to a myriad of criteria. It may adopt terms that refer to phenotypes and places. Both phenotypes and places may be as clear as our birthplace, the location from where we are looking at the world at a certain moment of our lives, or as complex and blurry as our diverse positions in society. In our binary categorization of the worlds in which we live, identity opposes otherness, self versus the other. The relation between these two terms is mainly or is defined as an opposition which uncovers difference. Self and other are different or speak from different positions or locations from which the individual looks at the world and understands it.